The arrival. The massive Zarkan warship emerged from hyperspace, its sleek, obsidian hull dwarfing the International Space Station as it took up position in low Earth orbit. Across the planet, millions watched their screens in awe and terror as the first alien contact humanity had ever experienced unfolded before their eyes. Admiral Kolaric stood on the bridge of the unstoppable fist, his four arms crossed over his armored chest as he gazed down at the blue-green world below. His species had conquered 1,000 worlds across the galaxy, each campaign adding to the glory of the Zarkan Empire. This latest conquest would be no different. Pitiful, he growled, mandibles clicking in disgust. Their largest orbital structure is barely the size of a fighter bay. Prepare the ultimatum. On the surface, in the United Nations emergency session in New York, the atmosphere was tense but determined. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's hastily appointed representative for extraterrestrial relations, stood at the podium, her voice steady despite the weight of humanity's fate on her shoulders. "We've received their demands," she announced to the assembly of world leaders. "The Zarkan, as they call themselves, are giving us 24 hours to surrender unconditionally or face total annihilation." A murmur of fear rippled through the chamber, but Elena raised her hand for silence. "However, I propose we respond not with fear or aggression, but with an invitation to learn." The murmur turned to confusion. President Lai of China stood up. "Learn? Dr. Vasquez, with all due respect, this is hardly the time for academic pursuits. We should be mobilizing our defenses." Elena shook her head. "Our combined military might is nothing compared to a species capable of interstellar travel. But we have something they don't expect. Our history, our understanding of conflict and peace that spans millennia. I suggest we offer to share that knowledge with them." "You want to bore them into submission with history lessons," the British Prime Minister scoffed. "No," Elena replied firmly. "I want to show them why conquest alone is a path to ruin. We've learned this lesson through blood and fire. If we can make them understand, we might just save humanity without firing a shot." After hours of heated debate, the Assembly finally agreed to Elena's unorthodox plan. As the deadline approached, she stood before the global broadcast system, her message beamed directly to the Zarkan ship above. "People of Earth, and to our visitors from the stars," she began, her voice calm and clear. "We have received your ultimatum, and we have a response. We will not surrender, but neither do we wish for war. Instead, we extend an invitation to you, Admiral Kolaric of the Zarkan. Come down to Earth. Let us share with you the history of our world, the lessons we've learned through millennia of conflict and cooperation. Before you decide to conquer us, understand us. We have 24 hours. Let us use them wisely." On the bridge of the unstoppable fist, Admiral Kolaric watched the transmission with a mixture of surprise and amusement. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Zex, chittered nervously. "Admiral, surely this is a trick. They must be buying time to mount a defense." Kolaric's upper eyes narrowed while his lower ones focused on the image of Dr. Vasquez. "Perhaps, but what defense could they possibly mount in a single rotation of their world? No, this is interesting. In 1,000 conquests, no species has ever responded quite like this." He stood, his massive frame towering over the bridge crew. "Prepare my shuttle. I will hear what these humans have to say. If nothing else, it will make for an amusing diversion before we crush them." As Kolaric's shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, escorted by a wary formation of fighter jets, Elena Vasquez and a small team of historians and diplomats waited on the landing pad at the United Nations headquarters. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, resting not on weapons or shields, but on the power of understanding and the lessons of history. The shuttle touched down with a hiss of hydraulics, and the hatch opened. Admiral Kolaric ducked to exit the craft, his imposing figure causing even the stoic security personnel to take an involuntary step back. He stood nearly 10 feet tall, his four arms ending in clawed hands, his exoskeleton a deep purple that seemed to absorb the sunlight. Elena stepped forward, craning her neck to meet the alien's four eyes. "Admiral Kolarek, welcome to Earth. I am Dr. Elena Vasquez. We appreciate you accepting our invitation." Kolarek's mandibles clicked as he spoke, his words translated through a device on his armor. "I accepted out of curiosity, human. Your species intrigues me. But do not mistake this for weakness. You have until the original deadline to convince me not to turn your world to ash." Elena nodded, maintaining her composure. "Understood. Admiral, please follow me. We have much to show you, and little time to do it." As they walked into the UN building, crowds of people lining the streets watched in a mixture of fear and awe. Kolarek observed them with his upper eyes while keeping his lower eyes fixed on Elena. "Your people do not flee at the sight of me," he noted. "Are they not afraid?" "Oh, they're afraid," Elena replied honestly. "But humans have a long history of facing their fears. It's one of the first things we'd like to show you." They entered a large conference room that had been hastily converted into a multimedia presentation space. Holographic projectors hummed to life, filling the air with three-dimensional images of Earth's history. "Admiral," Elena began, "you see humanity as weak because we're divided, because we lack a unified empire or grand fleet. But our strength comes from something else entirely. Let me show you where we've been, and perhaps you'll understand where we're going." The first images flickered to life. Cave paintings, ancient tools, early human settlements. "We started as hunter-gatherers, small tribes constantly at war with each other and the harsh world around us. But even then, we had something special. The ability to learn, to adapt, to pass knowledge from one generation to the next." Kolarek watched impassively, his posture radiating skepticism. "All species evolve, human. This is not unique." "Perhaps not," Elena conceded. "But watch how quickly we did it." The images blurred forward through time, showing the rise and fall of ancient civilizations, the development of agriculture, writing, mathematics. Kolarek's upper eyes widened slightly as he saw the speed of human progress. "Impressive," he admitted grudgingly. "But progress often comes through conflict. Show me your wars, human. Show me the true measure of your species." Elena's expression grew somber. "As you wish, Admiral. But I warn you, it's not a pretty sight." The holograms shifted, displaying scenes of human warfare throughout history, from ancient battles with spears and swords to the horrific mechanized slaughter of modern conflicts. The room filled with images of humanity's capacity for destruction. Kolarek watched with growing interest, his mandibles clicking rapidly in what Elena realized was excitement. "Yes," he hissed. "This is what I expected. Your species knows war, knows how to inflict pain and death. Perhaps you are not as weak as I thought." "You misunderstand, Admiral," Elena said softly. "We're not showing you this to impress you with our capacity for violence. We're showing you because these are the mistakes we're trying to learn from." The images changed again, this time showing the aftermath of wars. Devastated cities, grieving families, ecological disasters. Every conflict taught us something, Admiral. About the cost of war, about the fragility of life, about the importance of understanding our enemies as well as ourselves. Kolarek's excitement faded, replaced by confusion. "You speak as if war is undesirable. For the Zarkan, war is how we prove our worth, how we establish our place in the universe." Elena nodded. "We used to think that way too. But look." The holograms now showed scenes of cooperation, the founding of the United Nations, international scientific collaborations, joint efforts to combat climate change and disease. We learned that our true strength doesn't come from conquering others, but from working together. From combining our knowledge, our resources, our unique perspectives to solve problems that no single nation or individual could tackle alone. Kolarek was silent for a long moment, his four eyes darting between the images and Elena's face. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. You've given me much to consider, Dr. Vasquez. But pretty pictures and fine words do not change the reality of power. The Zarkan Empire has stood for 10,000 years on the principle that strength alone determines the right to exist. Elena met his gaze steadily. Then let us show you more. Admiral, we've only scratched the surface of human history. Give us the time you promised, and we'll demonstrate that there's more than one kind of strength in this universe. As they prepared to delve deeper into humanity's past and potential future, the clock continued to tick down. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, dependent on the power of understanding and the hope that even the most warlike species could learn the value of peace. First lessons. As the sun rose on the second day of the Zarkan's arrival, tension gripped the globe. In homes, offices, and public spaces around the world, people gathered around screens, waiting for news of humanity's fate. Inside the United Nations complex, Dr. Elena Vasquez and her team of historians and diplomats prepared for another round of presentations to Admiral Kolarek. The Zarkan leader entered the room, his massive frame seeming even more imposing in the morning light. Elena noticed a change in his demeanor. The dismissive arrogance of the previous day had been replaced by a guarded curiosity. "You have my attention, Dr. Vasquez," Kolarek rumbled. "Yesterday, you showed me the broad strokes of your species' history. Today, I want details. Show me the wars you're most proud of, the conquests that define your people." Elena exchanged a glance with her team before responding. "Admiral, I'm afraid you've misunderstood our intention. We're not proud of our wars. We remember them, we learn from them, but pride, that's not the emotion they evoke." Kolarek's 4 eyes blinked in astonishment. "Not proud? Then why fight at all?" "An excellent question," Elena said, gesturing to the holographic display. "Let's explore that." The air filled with images of World War II, showing the rise of fascism, the Holocaust, and the global conflict that followed. Elena's voice was solemn as she narrated. "This was one of the largest and deadliest conflicts in our history. It was fought not for pride or conquest, but to stop the spread of an ideology that threatened to destroy everything we held dear." Kolarek watched intently as scenes of battle gave way to images of liberation, of concentration camps being freed, of jubilant crowds celebrating the end of the war. "You fought to protect others?" he asked, mandibles clicking in confusion. "Even those not of your own tribe or nation?" Elena nodded. "Yes. We learned, painfully and slowly, that the suffering of others, no matter how far away, ultimately affects us all. But watch what happened after the war ended." The holograms shifted to show the Nuremberg trials, the formation of the United Nations, and the Marshall Plan. "We didn't just defeat our enemies, we helped rebuild their countries. We established international laws and organizations to prevent such a catastrophe from happening again. We realize that true victory isn't in destruction, but in creating a lasting peace." Kolarek's lower eyes narrowed. "This seems inefficient. Why not simply destroy your enemies utterly, ensure they can never rise against you again?" "Because that approach only breeds more conflict," Elena explained. "Let me show you an example from more recent history." The display changed to show the aftermath of the 9/11's terrorist attacks and the subsequent war on terror. "When we were attacked here," Elena pointed to the image of the falling towers, "our first instinct was to retaliate with overwhelming force. We invaded countries, toppled regimes, unleashed our military might." Kolarek nodded approvingly, but Elena held up a hand. "Watch what happened next." Images of protracted guerrilla warfare, civilian casualties, and growing anti-American sentiment around the world filled the air. Our actions, though born from a desire for justice and security, often created more enemies than they eliminated. We learned, painfully, that military might alone cannot solve complex global problems. The Zarkan admiral was silent for a long moment, his clawed hands clenching and unclenching as he processed this information. Finally, he spoke. "Your history is perplexing, human. You possess the strength to dominate. Yet you choose restraint. You have the power to destroy your enemies. Yet you extend a hand in peace. How can a species survive with such weakness? Elena smiled softly. That's just it, Admiral. What you see as weakness, we've come to recognize as our greatest strength. Our capacity for empathy, for understanding and cooperation, has allowed us to overcome challenges that no amount of military might could solve. She gestured, and the holograms changed once more, this time showing scenes of international cooperation. Scientists from different countries working together on the International Space Station, global efforts to combat climate change, multinational peacekeeping forces. This is how we've survived and thrived, Admiral. Not by crushing our enemies, but by turning them into friends. Not by hoarding knowledge and power, but by sharing it. We've learned that the most powerful force in the universe isn't destruction, but creation. Kolarek's 4 eyes darted between the images, his expression unreadable. These are alien concepts to the Zarkan. We have always believed that strength alone determines the right to exist. That war is the ultimate test of a species' worth. Elena nodded understanding. And how has that belief served you, Admiral? Has it brought your people happiness, security, a sense of purpose beyond the next conquest? The alien leader's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign Elena had come to recognize as agitation. You ask questions that no Zarkan would dare voice, he rumbled. Our way has served us for millennia. We are the strongest species in the known galaxy. Perhaps in terms of military might, Elena conceded. But strength takes many forms. Let me show you one more example before we break for the day. The holograms coalesced into a single image, a photograph of Earth taken from the moon, the famous Earthrise shot. This picture changed how we saw ourselves, Elena explained. For the first time, we saw our world as it truly is, a small, fragile oasis of life in a vast, uncaring cosmos. We realize that our differences of race, nation, ideology were insignificant compared to our shared humanity and our common home. She turned to face Kolarek directly. Admiral, you came here expecting to find an easy conquest. Instead, you found a species that has learned, through blood and fire, the true cost of war and the true value of peace. We're not perfect, far from it. We still fight, we still struggle with our worst impulses, but we're striving to be better, to reach for the stars not as conquerors, but as explorers and friends. Kolarek was silent for a long moment, his alien features impossible for Elena to read. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. You have given me much. The turning point. As the third day of the Zarkan's visit dawned, a palpable tension had settled over the Earth. In the streets outside the United Nations, crowds had gathered, a mix of protesters, supporters, and those simply drawn by the historic nature of the events unfolding. The world held its breath, waiting to see if humanity's gamble would pay off. Inside the conference room, Admiral Kolarek paced back and forth, his massive frame casting long shadows in the early morning light. Dr. Elena Vasquez watched him carefully, trying to gauge his state of mind. The previous day's lessons had clearly affected him, but whether for good or ill remained to be seen. Your history is troubling, Kolarek finally said, turning to face Elena. It contradicts everything the Zarkan have believed for millennia. I find myself uncertain. Elena nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Uncertainty can be uncomfortable, Admiral, but it's also the first step towards growth and understanding. The alien leader's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession. Perhaps, but it is not a feeling we Zarkan are accustomed to. Doubt is seen as weakness in our culture. And yet, Elena pressed gently, you're willing to entertain these doubts. That takes its own kind of strength, doesn't it? Before Kolarek could respond, the door burst open. Sub-Commander Zek stormed in, his armor clanking ominously. Admiral. He chittered, mandibles clicking furiously. What is the meaning of this delay? Our warriors grow restless. They demand to know why we haven't crushed these primitives yet. Kolderek's posture stiffened, his earlier uncertainty vanishing beneath a mask of stern authority. "Stand down, Sub-Commander. I will decide when and if we strike." Zex's lower eyes narrowed. "With all due respect, Admiral, some of the fleet captains are beginning to question your resolve. They wonder if these humans have corrupted you with their soft ideas." The tension in the room was palpable. Elena held her breath, acutely aware that the fate of humanity might hinge on the next few moments. Kolderek took a menacing step towards Zex. "Are you questioning my authority, Sub-Commander?" Zex straightened, clearly torn between his ingrained respect for authority and his warlike instincts. "No, Admiral. But the longer we delay, the more time the humans have to prepare defenses. We should strike now, while we still have the element of surprise." "Surprise?" Elena interjected, unable to keep silent. "Admiral, Sub-Commander, if I may, you've been in orbit for days. Your ship is visible to anyone with a telescope. There's no element of surprise left." Both aliens turned to look at her, seeming to have momentarily forgotten her presence. "What the human says is true," Kolderek rumbled. "And in any case, I have given my word that I would hear them out. The honor of the Zarkin is at stake." Zex's mandibles clicked in agitation. "Honor? What of the honor of conquest? Of proving our strength?" "Perhaps," Kolderek said slowly, "there is more than one kind of strength, more than one kind of honor." He turned to Elena. "Continue your lessons, human. I would hear more." Zex's posture radiated disgust, but he didn't dare challenge the Admiral further. With a final, menacing glare at Elena, he stormed out of the room. Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you, Admiral. Shall we continue?" Kolderek nodded, his 4 eyes focused intently on her. "Yes, but I warn you, Dr. Vasquez, my patience is not infinite. You must show me something truly remarkable if you hope to sway me from the path of conquest." Elena smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "As it happens, Admiral, I believe we have just the thing. Today, we're going to show you humanity's greatest triumphs, not in war, but in peace." The holographic display hummed to life once more, this time showing a montage of humanity's scientific and cultural achievements. From the first controlled flight at Kitty Hawk to the moon landing, from the eradication of smallpox to the mapping of the human genome, the images flowed by in a breathtaking display of human ingenuity and perseverance. "These are our true victories," Elena explained. "Conquests not of territory or peoples, but of knowledge and understanding. Each of these achievements required the cooperation of thousands, sometimes millions of individuals, often across national and cultural boundaries." Kolderek watched in silence, his alien features unreadable. Elena continued, her voice gaining strength and passion. "And it's not just in science and technology that we've excelled. Look at our art, our music, our literature." The holograms shifted, displaying great works of human creativity from around the world and throughout history. "These are the products of our imaginations, our ability to see beyond what is to what could be. They inspire us, challenge us, help us to understand ourselves and each other." The Zarkan Admiral's lower eyes narrowed in concentration. "This creativity. It is not something we value highly in Zarkan culture. Art, music, these are seen as distractions from the pursuit of strength and conquest." Elena nodded, understanding. "But don't you see, Admiral, this creativity, this drive to explore and understand and create, this is our strength. It's what's allowed us to adapt, to overcome challenges, to constantly push the boundaries of what's possible." She gestured, and the holograms coalesced into a single image, a visualization of the internet, showing the vast, interconnected web of human knowledge and communication. "This is perhaps our greatest achievement. We've created a global network that allows instant communication and sharing of information across the entire planet. It's not perfect. It can be used for harm as well as good, but it's a testament to our desire to connect, to learn, to grow. Kolarex's 4 eyes widened in evident surprise. Your entire species is connected in this way. All knowledge shared freely. Not all knowledge, Elena admitted. We still have our secrets, our conflicts. But yes, a vast amount of human knowledge and culture is available to anyone with a connection. It's democratized learning in a way that was unimaginable just a few decades ago. The Admiral was silent for a long moment, his clawed hands opening and closing as he processed this information. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost reverent. In all our conquests, in all our travels across the stars, we Zarkan have never encountered anything like this. We have subjugated species far more technologically advanced than you, yet none have shown this. Creativity, this drive to connect and share knowledge. Elena smiled softly. That's because you've been looking at strength all wrong, Admiral. True strength isn't about domination or conquest. It's about resilience, adaptability, the ability to learn and grow and change. Kolarek turned to face her fully, his massive frame looming over her. But for the first time, Elena didn't feel threatened by his presence. There was something new in his alien eyes, a glimmer of understanding, perhaps even respect. You have given me much to think about, Dr. Vasquez, he rumbled. I find myself conflicted. Our ways have served us for so long, yet I cannot deny the power of what you've shown me. Before Elena could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the building. A human aide burst into the room, panic evident on his face. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral, we're detecting multiple ships decloaking in orbit. It looks like part of the Zarkan fleet is preparing to attack. Kolarex's posture stiffened, his earlier contemplation replaced by battle readiness. Zex, he growled. He must have convinced some of the other captains to mutiny. He turned to Elena, his voice urgent. Your lesson isn't over, human. Now you must show me how your species handles a crisis. How will your vaunted cooperation and creativity fare against the might of the Zarkan war machine? As sirens wailed, and the first flashes of orbital bombardment lit up the sky, Elena met the Admiral's gaze steadily. Watch and learn. Admiral, you're about to see humanity at its best. The fate of the Earth now hung in the balance, with humanity's greatest strengths about to be put to the ultimate test. Crisis and innovation. The sky above New York erupted in a dazzling, terrifying light show as Zarkan warships began their assault. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, their targets seemingly random. A wheat field in Kansas, a desert expanse in the Sahara, the middle of the Pacific Ocean. In the UN Command Center, screens flickered with incoming data from around the globe. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the chaos, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the panic around her. Admiral Kolarek loomed beside her, his 4 eyes darting between the displays. Your cities remain untouched, he observed, mandibles clicking in confusion. This is not how the Zarkan wage war. Elena nodded, her eyes fixed on a particular screen. They're testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses. But look here. She pointed to a map showing the points of impact. There's a pattern. Your renegade commanders are being cautious. Kolarex's lower eyes narrowed. Cautious is not a word often used to describe Zarkan tactics. Perhaps, Elena said with a slight smile. They're not as certain of their superiority as they'd like us to believe. Before the Admiral could respond, a new alarm blared. A technician called out, incoming. Multiple projectiles detected, on course for major population centers. Elena's composure slipped for just a moment, fear flickering across her face. But then her jaw set with determination. Activate the EDEN system, she ordered. Around the world, hidden installations hummed to life. In orbit, a network of satellites previously invisible to Zarkan scanners suddenly activated. Beams of coherent light lanced out, intercepting the incoming projectiles. Most were vaporized instantly. Those that made it through this first line of defense were met by swarms of autonomous drones, sacrificing themselves to detonate the alien weapons safely in the upper atmosphere. Kolarek watched in stunned silence as humanity's previously hidden defensive capabilities were revealed. "Impossible," he muttered. "Our scans detected nothing like this." Elena allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The EDEN system, Earth Defense Emergency Network. A collaborative project involving scientists and engineers from over 100 nations. We've been working on it in secret for years, ever since we realized we weren't alone in the universe. The Admiral's upper eyes blinked rapidly. But how? The level of cooperation required, the ability to keep such a thing secret. It wasn't easy, Elena admitted. There were disagreements, setbacks, moments when it seemed impossible. But we persevered, because we understood that the only way to protect our world was to work together. On the screens, the Zarkan attack faltered as ship after ship found its weapons neutralized. But the alien fleet was vast, and Earth's defenses, while impressive, were not inexhaustible. "Clever," Kolarek rumbled, "but ultimately futile. You've revealed your defenses now. The fleet will adapt, find weaknesses. It's only a matter of time." Elena nodded grimly. "You're right, which is why defense isn't our only strategy." She tapped a command into a nearby console, and new information flooded the screens. "While we've been talking these past few days, Admiral, humanity has been preparing." The displays showed a flurry of activity around the globe. Factories retooling to produce advanced weaponry. Laboratories working around the clock on countermeasures to Zarkan technology. And in orbit, a growing fleet of ships unlike anything Kolarek had ever seen. What are those?" he asked, mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. "We call them the Phoenix class," Elena explained. "Designed to be built quickly from readily available materials. They're not as powerful as your warships, but they're agile, adaptable, and there are a lot of them." As they watched, the human ships began to engage the Zarkan fleet. They moved in complex, unpredictable patterns, using the debris of destroyed satellites and the Earth itself for cover. Where Zarkan ships were rigid and hierarchical in their tactics, the human fleet was fluid, each ship acting with a degree of autonomy, while still coordinating with the whole. "Impossible," Kolarek breathed. "You couldn't have built a fleet like this in just a few days." Elena's eyes twinkled. "We didn't. We've had the designs ready for years, distributed to shipyards and factories around the world. When the signal came, everyone knew their part. From the largest corporation to the smallest machine shop, we all worked together. The battle in orbit raged on, a deadly dance of energy beams and kinetic weapons. The Zarkan ships were more powerful, but the human vessels were endless in their ingenuity. When one tactic failed, they immediately shifted to another. When a weakness was found in their defenses, it was patched almost instantly, the fix shared across the entire fleet in real time. Kolarek watched in growing awe as humanity's true strength was revealed. It wasn't just their technology or their numbers, but their adaptability, their creativity, their unflagging determination in the face of overwhelming odds. "This," Elena said softly, "is who we are, Admiral. Not just soldiers or scientists or artists, but all of these things and more. We're a species that thrives on challenge, that looks at the impossible and says, 'Not yet.'" As they watched, the tide of battle began to turn. The renegade Zarkan fleet, for all its power, found itself outmaneuvered and outthought at every turn. Ship after ship fell silent, disabled by precision strikes, or simply overwhelmed by swarms of smaller craft. Kolarek's communicator crackled to life. "Admiral." It was Zex, his voice strained with a mixture of rage and fear. "These humans, they're not fighting like prey. Our tactics are useless against them. We need your help." The Admiral was silent for a long moment, his alien features unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached up and crushed the communicator in his clawed hand. "No," he said simply. Elena looked at him, hope and uncertainty warring in her eyes. "Admiral." Kolarek turned to her, and for the first time, Elena saw something like respect in his 4 eyes. "You were right, Dr. Vasquez. There is more than one kind of strength in this universe. And I believe we Zarkan have much to learn." As the last of the renegade ships surrendered or fled, a new chapter in galactic history began to unfold. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. And the Zarkan, that ancient and warlike race, found themselves confronted with ideas that would shake the very foundations of their civilization. The crisis was over, but the true test of coexistence, of mutual understanding, of growth, was just beginning. A new understanding. In the days following the failed Zarkan attack, Earth buzzed with a mixture of celebration and apprehension. Humanity had defended itself against an overwhelmingly superior force, but the question on everyone's mind was, what comes next? In the United Nations General Assembly Hall, representatives from every nation on Earth gathered alongside a delegation of Zarkan, led by Admiral Kolarek. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of history palpable in the air. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the podium, her voice steady as she addressed the assembled crowd. "We stand at a crossroads," she began. "For the first time in our history, humanity has come face to face with an alien civilization. We've fought, we've learned, and now we must decide. What kind of future do we want to build?" Kolarek stepped forward, his massive frame dwarfing Elena. When he spoke, his voice was low and thoughtful. "For 10,000 years, the Zarkan Empire has expanded across the stars, conquering all in our path. We believe this was the natural order of things. That strength alone determined the right to exist." He paused, his 4 eyes scanning the crowd. "We were wrong." A murmur ran through the assembly. Elena felt a glimmer of hope in her chest as Kolarek continued. "In just a few of your Earth days, you humans have shown us a kind of strength we never knew existed. Not the strength of weapons or fleets, but the strength of unity, of adaptability, of unyielding determination in the face of overwhelming odds." Kolarek's words hung in the air, the significance of his admission not lost on anyone in the room. He continued, his voice gaining strength. "We came here seeking conquest, but instead we found enlightenment. You humans, with your brief lives and your fragile bodies, have accomplished more in a few thousand years than we Zarkan have in tens of thousands. Your art, your music, your ceaseless drive to understand the universe around you. These are strengths we never valued, never even recognized." The Admiral's gaze swept across the assembly, lingering on the faces of humans and Zarkan alike. "But now we see, and we must ask ourselves, what is the purpose of strength if not to create? What is the value of power if it does not serve life?" Elena stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder, or rather, shoulder to mid-torso, with Kolarek. "Admiral," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, "on behalf of humanity, I thank you for your words. But the question remains, where do we go from here?" Kolarek nodded, his massive frame seeming to relax slightly. "Indeed, the Zarkan Empire stands at a crossroads. For the first time in our history, we face a species that we cannot simply conquer. More than that, we face ideas that challenge the very foundations of our society." He turned to address the Zarkan delegation directly. "My brothers, my sisters, I propose something unprecedented. I propose that we learn from these humans, that we set aside our warlike ways and embrace a new path, a path of exploration, of creation, of cooperation." A ripple of shock ran through the Zarkan delegates. One of them, a battle-scarred warrior, stood up. "But Admiral," he protested, "what of our traditions, our way of life? Are we to abandon everything we are?" Kolarek shook his head. "Not abandon, no, but evolve, grow, For too long, we have stagnated, believing that conquest was the only way forward. But look at what these humans have achieved through cooperation and creativity. Imagine what we could accomplish if we combined our strength with their innovation. Elena seized the moment. Admiral Kolarek is right. We stand at the dawn of a new era, not just for humanity or for the Zarkan, but for all sentient life in our galaxy. We have an opportunity here to break the cycle of conflict, to forge a new path based on mutual understanding and respect. She gestured to the screens around the hall, which lit up with images of Earth's achievements. Great works of art, technological marvels, scenes of cooperation across national and cultural boundaries. This is who we are, Elena continued. Not perfect, not without flaws, but always striving to be better, to learn, to grow, to reach beyond what we thought was possible. And now we extend our hand in friendship to the Zarkan, and to all other species we may encounter among the stars. Kolarek stepped forward once more. And we accept, he rumbled, extending one massive, clawed hand towards Elena. On behalf of the Zarkan Empire, I propose an alliance. Not one of conquest or subjugation, but of mutual growth and exploration. Elena took his hand without hesitation, the contrast between her small human hand and his massive alien one a powerful visual symbol of the moment. On behalf of Earth and all humanity, we accept your proposal, Admiral. The hall erupted in a mixture of cheers, excited chatter, and the clicking of Zarkan mandibles. As the noise died down, Elena raised her voice once more. This is just the beginning, she said. We have much to learn from each other, and undoubtedly many challenges to overcome. But together, I believe we can create a future brighter than either of our species could have imagined alone. Kolarek nodded in agreement. Indeed, the stars await us, not as conquerors, but as explorers and friends. Let this day mark the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history. As the assembly broke into applause, Elena couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had led to this moment. Just days ago, humanity had faced annihilation. Now they stood on the brink of a new age of galactic cooperation. In the months and years that followed, the alliance between humans and Zarkan would face many tests. There were misunderstandings, setbacks, moments when it seemed the old ways might reassert themselves. But every challenge was met with the same spirit of creativity, adaptability, and determination that had defined humanity's stand against the Zarkan fleet. Zarkan warriors learned to channel their strength into exploration and protection rather than conquest. Human scientists worked alongside Zarkan engineers, combining their knowledge to push the boundaries of what was possible. And slowly but surely, a new galactic civilization began to emerge. One built on the principles of mutual respect, shared knowledge, and the belief that true strength lies not in domination, but in cooperation. As Elena stood on the observation deck of the first joint human-Zarkan exploratory vessel, watching Earth recede into the distance, she thought back to those tense days when the fate of humanity hung in the balance. They had gambled everything on the power of understanding, on the hope that even the most warlike species could learn the value of peace. And they had won, not through force of arms, but through the very qualities that made humanity unique: their creativity, their adaptability, their unwavering determination to reach for the stars. As the ship accelerated towards the unknown, Elena smiled. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and humanity was ready to face whatever challenges it might hold, not alone, but hand in hand with their new allies. The lesson of Earth, the story of humanity's stand against the Zarkan, would echo across the cosmos for generations to come. It was a testament to the idea that true strength lies not in conquest, but in understanding, not in destruction, but in creation. And as the stars streaked by outside the viewpoint, Elena knew that this was just the beginning of humanity's greatest adventure.